I now want to review Section 6, the fundamentals of shooting. We're not going to discuss them all, but we're going to discuss the grip, we're going to discuss aiming, and we're going to discuss trigger control. As you learned earlier, trigger control and aiming are the two most important shooting fundamentals. But having a good grip is very important too. When taking a grip, you want to make sure it's in the web of your hand. The three fingers are wrapped around the grip. Your trigger finger's alongside of the frame, and your thumb is resting against the grip over here. Your weak hand is going to cover that up, right up against the trigger guard and overlapping these fingers, so your grip will be like this. That is a good grip that you want to use when you're shooting two-handed. When we talk about aiming, we're always talking about the front sight and the rear sight. When the front sight and the rear sight are level and even, and you are focused on the front sight, you are going to be able to hit what you are aiming at. If you look at this first graphic, you will notice the front sight and the rear sight are lined up. The front sight's crisp and clear, the rear sight's a little blurry, and the target's a little blurry. When you pull the trigger, you hit dead center of the bullseye. If you look at this next graphic, you'll see the sights aren't lined up correctly, and when you pull the trigger, the bullet goes where the front sight is. And the same for this last graphic. Now let's talk about trigger control. Trigger control is very important, and I'm going to demonstrate trigger finger placement. People want to tell you all the time that your pad of your finger right here goes right on the trigger. That is typically true, but if you have long fingers or short fingers, that might not be the case. What you want is if you watch the muzzle of this, when you pull this trigger to the rear, the muzzle does not move left or right. Now I'm going to put my finger in too far and pull this trigger, and if you watch, that muzzle moves to the right. Now I'm going to put my finger in on the trigger, not quite far enough. And if you see, when I pull the trigger, I am pushing off to the left. So the most important part of trigger control is where I'm going to put my trigger, so when I pull this, it comes straight to the rear. The second part of aiming is pulling the trigger nice and slow so I don't jerk it and jerk the gun left or right. It's very hard to see this without doing it in slow motion, but if you watch the end of this muzzle, notice it goes to the left. If you're a left-hander, it'll go to the right. If you see your bullets going low and left, you are probably pulling your trigger too fast. Pull it nice and slow, relax, don't let the recoil scare you. That's why you want a nice, smooth trigger control. The thing about trigger control and all the fundamentals is practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better your trigger pull is going to be, the better your sight alignment, your stance, your grip, everything. But always practice in a safe environment with a gun pointed in a safe direction.